In today's video, you're going to learn how to make simple fluid effects inside of Cinema 4D using XParticles. Let's go! Hey everybody, it's Nick here again from Greyscalegorilla.com, bringing you the tools, training, and tutorials to help make you a better motion designer. Now we have a really fun XParticles tutorial for you today, but before we get started, if you've been considering purchasing a license of XParticles, consider getting it from Greyscalegorilla. If you purchase it from us, you also get 30 free preset scene files in order to get you up and running with XParticles right away. All right, with that, let's head on into today's tutorial. So today you're going to learn how to get started with the Flip Solver for XParticles. If you've ever wanted liquid effects for your particles, the Flip Solver is the easiest way to do that. Have your particles collect in a container, slosh around, move around, and even get different colors depending on how fast they go. It's a really simple setup, but very powerful for many different XParticles effects. All right, let's head on into Cinema 4D and let's get particling. Is particling a word? Let's get particling.
Let me show you what we're working with here. So here's an example of the new Flip Solver, and it's a fluid simulator that produces really fast results using XParticles, Cinema 4D, and you get the point. But you can see the results we have here, really fast to render, really fast to set up, and some pretty cool results. Now, I haven't rendered anything with like transparent kind of liquid, realistic liquid, but I've been just playing with the settings to kind of figure out what is possible. This was a really fun one when we used multiple settings here, multiple streams to make kind of a stair-stepping effect, and then a big one at the bottom to collect it all. But really fun stuff, a really unique look, and I wanted to show you how to quickly set this up in Cinema. So go to your XParticles and get an XP system. That's the first thing you do, and this kind of is the controller for everything. You don't need this. You can just grab things as you want, but this kind of keeps it organized, especially with more complicated systems. I prefer this method. And what this also does is it puts all the generators and everything in their own objects here. So it allows us to really quickly go, I want a generator object, I want an emitter, and hit play, and we got particles streaming out, right? So here's how you set this up. You use the Flip Solver. So what you want to do is go into the dynamics and choose the new flip domain. And now it's going to say flip domain, but when it comes into the scene here, it says XP domain. And what this does is it sets up your scene here with a big box to enclose all the particles. So if we just hit play again, you're going to see when those particles reach the wall, it's going to kind of explode out. And from what I read, basically the Flip Solver is an easy way to kind of put a bunch of, let's say, springs in this box that give these particles things to react with. So there's actual air in the box, and there's actual space walls to hit and all these things. So it's kind of this little toy box that renders very quickly fluid sims. So let me show you a little bit more on how to set it up. You're going to need some gravity. So you go to motion modifiers and you go to gravity. Boom. And now we got fluids, right? In fact, we can really crank up the, first of all, let's make this a little bit longer so we can see. You can see it plays back very quickly. And our box here just continues to fill up with particles. In fact, we can go to our emitter and go to our emission and say, I want this birth rate to be like 3,000 instead of 1,000. And you can see a lot more particles come out. We get nice splashes with riding up the wall here. We get all these effects. And here's a fun thing we can also do is go to our display, and we can, instead of having a solid color, of course, we could just change this color to something like blue here. But even more fun, we can go, instead of single color, we can go to gradient parameter. What gradient parameter allows us to do is define the color of our particles based on one of these parameters. And one fun one is just speed. So now the faster the particle moves, the more white it will become, and the more stable it is, the more blue it will become. So we just start to get a little bit more of a fluid effect. You can even crank up the minimums and maximums here to get more or less blue or white, right? So here's the basic setup. You can also, of course, take the emitter, rotate it around, and just kind of, more similar to my examples, just kind of throw it right down into the center of the scene. Now you can also use another emitter. Okay, so we could just duplicate the emitter, move it over, and both of them will be calculating in the same scene. And we can color these different ones and all that stuff. So really fast to render. You can see it's really, really easy, and we're all set. In fact, when I deleted that one, we got a big splash. That was kind of fun. Okay, so what do we do now? We hit render, and nothing's here. Well, with XParticles, you have to tell the object to use a texture, and you can use a XParticles material. So if you add that to our emitter, then the XParticles material will just display whatever particle color it is at the time. So we have this white and blue. We have a lot of settings in here. We can change stuff. So we can just use the particle color as we are, or we can get even fancier with our colors and say, get a random color. And that'll just give us random stuff here. We can do random from gradient. And then we can actually, similar to how we set it up the first way, we could use this gradient controlled by age, controlled by speed, controlled by density, all these new things here we could play with. I'm just going to use the particle color for now because I like the white and blue here. And we can also go adjust things like size and vary the size of our particles and make them smaller. So now they're a lot smaller and more random sizes, or we can make them very big particles, and there you go. We got all these spheres popping up. I'll go into more texture stuff in other tutorials because what we're going to do is something a little bit different. What we're going to do is use the XParticles tracer system to create little trails on these particles. And the reason is because these dots, when they render, they don't seem very fluid. And I don't necessarily want to get into skinning this to make it look transparent, although you can turn this into water and put a reflective material on it and a transparent material on it and go through all that. But as soon as you skin these particles, it's going to not render as fast, right? So how do we get the feeling of liquid, but without the render times even in the viewport, and also not the render times when we go to render this? How do we render this very quickly and still get the feeling of liquid? Well, there's a couple ways. First, let's set up the trails, because what the trails do is they trace the path of each one of these particles and add a trail to the end of it. And what that does is it kind of gives it a sense of motion, and it also gives you almost a fake motion blur, right? It's kind of following the particle. It's almost like if you just turn your shutter speed up a little bit, or slower, I should say, and you get these particle blurs. So let's add that. After talking about it for so long, let's just go at it. So if you go into your generators, you can go to trails. Now by default, when we rewind here, we're going to get trails on all of our particles all the time. So they're just going to trace our particles no matter where they go. And that's actually a pretty cool effect. We have to set up the texture again, but it is a pretty cool effect. Instead, though, what I want to do is say not a full scene trail. I just want maybe 5 frames. So now our trail length is 5 frames. As it comes out, it's going to splash up, and now we get a sense of liquid. Things are splashing, and when the particles are at rest, they become kind of like dots, and in motion, they become these like blurry things. Okay, so now what? We still hit render, nothing happens. We can create that XParticles material and use that on our emitter. If we use it on the emitter, we're going to get the dots. New to version 3 is if you put it on the trail, you're actually going to get the trails of your particles. So we have our blue and white trails here. And we can do a bunch of fun things here. We can adjust the color just like we did. We could use I guess the advantage to this is that we get to use the XParticles material shader here in order to affect a lot of things. So here we could affect the size. We can affect the size by age. And now we're getting more like little points. You can see the leading angle of this is thicker, and then it tapers out into something thinner toward the back. So maybe if we zoom in, we could see this better. But you can see they're more like little little hairs with the root being the lead, and then it kind of trails off into nothing. So this is a cool look. With this system, you can also go to your illumination and go to something like diffuse, and now you could add things like lights, and you can set up the lights in your scene, and you can get actual shadows inside of all this stuff. Another way to do this, so I encourage you to play along or play around with a lot of these settings. You could do a lot of fun stuff with the different XParticles materials, especially illumination, and playing with a lot of these different ones. There's a neon one that's pretty fun. It gives like a glow around stuff. Pretty interesting stuff. But the way that I built these animations was actually with Cinema 4D hair. And the reason I do that is because I found that it renders fast, and it also gives you these nice specular effects that I can't seem to replicate with the XParticles shader here. Maybe there's something I'm missing here. Illumination, shadows. Yeah, I don't see the specular thing, and I think it's the specular piece of it that makes it look really fun. So instead, what we're going to do is I'm going to create a new hair material, and I'm going to put this right on our trail and hit render. By default, we get the default brown hairs here. But we can go in here and, of course, change the color. So now we can make this a little bit more fun. We can make this a blue to, I don't know, orange gradient. Okay. And now we have a lot more detail here. But more importantly, we have the specular. The specular is what's giving us these nice highlights when it moves around. And I think the specular, to me, is what gives the hair look a little bit kind of a cooler look. So I'm realizing we're getting so far into all these setup here that I barely even went over the options in our domain itself. So let's go back and let's take our gravity, let's take our emitter and move it kind of to the center here. And of course you could animate all this and wiggle this around if you want and get a bunch of like splashes. Ooh, we had a leaky one there. Went too far over. All right, so what do we do now? What do we do with the settings in our XP domain? Well, first of all, we can turn up the viscosity. So instantly, we turn up the viscosity, and now we're pouring like glue and not water, okay? So the stickier the substance, right? So now it's going to fill up kind of like, it's going to be a little bit thicker. It's going to be a paste. Okay, so watch, especially when it starts here. It's going to kind of like build up on itself. Very cool effects. We could turn this way up and get a lot of cool viscous effects. We could add this with other objects as well. Pretty cool. A little bit goes a long way sometimes as well. So you can see the difference between 0 and 2 is huge. A lot of liquid stuff going on here. So what's vorticity? Vorticity, from what I'm reading and what I'm playing with, is kind of the turbulence for your domain. So if I turn this up, we're going to get a lot more of these splashes and a lot more kind of swirls around. So let's crank the vorticity, and you can see physical swirls that show up in our scene here. Now, of course, already the lack of light is bothering me, so I'm going to move this light up and over and try to get a nicer render here. That's a little bit better. I'm also going to turn on shadows, which shadows also work with hair. So we get these nice kind of fills here. I want it to bring it out a little bit further, but now we're going to get a little bit more depth in our scene, which I like already. Let's go back to the XP domain, talk about some other ones. First of all, our voxel limit is just how many kind of fake particles are in this scene. So we could drop this down to 10. That's going to give us a lot more. This will actually render a little bit slower, but it's going to give you a more accurate solve, especially with large scale scenes here. Conversely, we can go to 50. You can see how fast 50 runs, but we're not getting as much detail as we did before. So it's all about the scale of the scene. I'm going to turn this back to 20. The other one you could adjust is the offset and the size of our actual box here. So you can see we could play with the actual size here and get different size boxes to calculate and to kind of get our stuff going on here. What else can we do? We can also turn on and off different walls. So if you don't want one of these on, and I think we're actually looking at this from the wrong angle, let's just look at it from kind of world space correctness so that we could see the different walls. We could turn on and off these walls. So right now, X plus over here is just off, which means all the water or all the particles that go there just kind of like fall out that side. Now, what's cool is we can get another XP domain. I'm just going to duplicate this one, and we could set up a second one to catch it. Now this one has to have the roof off, which I think is plus Y. So let's make sure here. Now this will actually catch the particles going into it. And now we have this stair-stepping effect that you could see how I started to build this one. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these, and then a sixth one all the way at the bottom to catch all the ones that spilled over the stairs. And that's just how you set that up. And now you have a multiple kind of water flow kind of system here. And you can do as many of these as your computer can handle, as far as I can see, and set up your walls. The solver and the retiming is about scale again and about how fast and slow things are. And I haven't gone into every single detail, but these already are enough to get you enough to play around with. So let me go back to our domain and turn on our top wall here. I'm going to go back to the side because I like the view. And let's talk about combining two different systems. So, of course, what we could do is duplicate our emitter like we did earlier, bring this one over, and maybe this one kind of like spits out particles this way. And let's say with this emitter, we don't want it to be a part of the tracing system. We want it instead to use the regular XParticles stuff. So let's go in here and let's go to turn off neon. Let's just turn on diffuse. And in this case, maybe we say it's a random color from gradient. And now we say these are bright orange to this kind of yellow color. Okay, so now those particles will be that color. And you can see they're affected by the light. So we might need another light over here to kind of light those a little bit better. There we go. And what's awesome is they combine together. They actually influence each other as if they're two different liquid systems. So let me turn up the size of our particles just so we could see them a little bit better. A little bit better. You know, thousands of particles in this scene already. And you can see they're going to hopefully affect each other and kind of intermingle eventually. Like the orange ones are going to be pulled in over here. Really cool stuff. I want to pull this forward so they're not fighting as much. And similar to why I love Cinema 4D's dynamic system is everything here is, we're not baking anything. It's all you know, not in real time, but really fast. I'm going to move this one over and kind of like scoot it along the bottom there. And this one I want to move forward physically. Now, I don't want it to be outside of anything. There's also, of course, all the settings to come in and change your speed. So we can say the rate is fine. Let's change the speed. Let's crank the speed on this one. And also take the rectangle and make it a circle instead. Make it really small. Let's like throw a bunch of particles out at this thing. Move back around and two simple lights, two simple particles here. Let's hit play and see what we got. So they're interacting. They're splashing all over each other. And we have these two different streams here creating this crazy particle system. And it plays back so quickly. And the render, you can see how fast it renders. We have our trails. We have all this stuff. So experiment around with this. Come back in, change the length of your trails, you know, try some other stuff. I also want to grab this emitter, the original one, and speed that one up as well. So I want to go to our speed, crank it up. I want these to be really aggressive here. And of course, we can animate these things too. So you can have things splashing around your scene. You can animate objects inside of it. And all at this time, we have all these really, really nice shadows and all this stuff. Pretty cool stuff. If you ever want to adjust the shadows on objects in XParticles, they actually have a tag that allows you to do that. So we can add this to our light, and we can adjust the density of the shadows, and you can include and exclude this light from the XParticles render. Now, it won't work with hair, but anything in the XParticles here, you can, it's kind of its own compositing tag just for lights. Just a little bonus there. If you're playing around with XParticles this week, check that one out. So really, really fun stuff. I'm just scratching the surface of what is possible here. I want those particles to be even bigger, so I'm going to come in here and crank up the size a little bit. Might be too big now, but oh yeah, look at that. All these like spheres popping around. Really fun stuff. Really beautiful renders. Just really kind of weird liquid sim kind of thing to get this kind of stuff rendering very quickly, as you can see.
Thanks again for watching, everybody. And hey, if there's another part of XParticles that you want us to make a tutorial out of, put it down in the comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to show you more of what XParticles can do. All right, thank you as always for watching our tutorials here. We have plenty more, including many about XParticles, if you want to continue your training here on YouTube or at Greyscalegorilla.com. And with that, I hope to see you in another one of those videos really soon. And you keep particling. Now that we figured out that this is a word, I think I'm gonna try that one. All right, shut up, Nick. Keep particling, everybody. Bye. Liquid. Here's my liquid tutorial for today. Ooh, even tastes real. This tastes particularly good.